I don't really want to try hanging that engine on until I get all of the baffling and everything on it, which is not going to happen right away since that oil cooler is not going to come right away. Now I could go ahead and put all that stuff on there after I get the engine on there, but it's a whole lot easier to do with it sitting here on the workbench. So I guess I'll go ahead and go to work on some other things on the airplane. I've got the cabin pretty much taken care of. I got all the control cables in there, the rudder cables checked, aileron cables checked, the elevator cables are all checked inside the cockpit and the cabin area. The pulleys are lubricated. Checked the fuel pump and the fuel lines and stuff like that. Looked up in the wing roots and all of that stuff looks good in there, the wiring and the fuel lines and the attach points for the wings. I got the new throttle cable put in. Well, I guess what I'll do now is go ahead and drain the gas collator. That's the gas collator there, and that's one of the things you do on a 100-hour and on an annual is to take the gas collator off there, the sump off of there, and check it for water and debris, and there's a screen in there that can clean. So I'll do that next, and that's easier to do with the engine off of there than it is with the engine on. And I got the EGT probe there. There's really not anything wrong with that EGT probe. It's functional, but it's charred a little bit. So I got a new EGT probe. I'm going to go ahead and put it on. That doesn't really have to go on now because that's going to be, all that wiring and everything is going to be routed in and tied in with the wiring harness for the engine when we put the engine on there. So I don't really need to put that on now, but might as well do it. So I guess the next thing to do is to go back there to the tail and start checking out the tail section. I've got to pull the covers on the elevator trim system and lubricate all of that up and everything and check everything out back there. Well, I might as well be doing that while I'm waiting for all the engine parts and stuff to do. I'll go ahead and go over the airplane and check everything out and kind of do an inspection and repairs as necessary. Oh, I did find something to do here on the engine. On a regular Super Cub, it has a one-piece nose bowl that fits on here. And to get in to work on the alternator or the starter or the oil cooler, you've got to pull that nose bowl off of there. And to pull the nose bowl off, you have to pull the propeller off. I have the Cub Crafters cowling on here. It's a split two-piece cowling. So the top cowling comes off and it takes half the nose bowl off with it when it comes off. Which gives you access to everything on the engine just about to work on, at least the top half of the engine. You can change the spark plugs, work on the magnetos, change the oil filter. To work on the lower part of the engine, you drop the lower cowling down and the front half of the nose bowl comes down with it. And that gives you good access underneath the engine for the exhaust system and all of that stuff, but it gives you perfect ability to work on the starter and the alternator, and you don't have to worry about the oil cooler because it's mounted back here on the baffling on the back of the number 4 cylinder. But there's one thing, and that's if an alternator belt breaks. If an alternator belt breaks, then you've got to pull the propeller off, of course the ring gear off, to get an alternator belt on there. And that's a real pain if you're out in the field somewhere working or if you're between maintenance areas. I've had that happen. Well, one of the ways to get away from that is to mount a spare belt in here on the engine behind the ring gear, behind the propeller. And that way if a belt does break or get bad, you can just pop a new belt on. In fact, you can almost do it without taking the cowling off at all. So one of the things we've done on that, a lot of guys do on it, is to mount an extra belt on here, just wrap it around the front end of the engine and bring it back here and tie it off so it doesn't interfere with anything. And that way, if an alternator belt does break, I can just clip this tie wrap right here, pull the belt down, and put a new belt on there. Don't have to pull the propeller and all of that paraphernalia that goes with it. So anyway, that's what I just did. I just went ahead and put that belt on there. I've got it tied on. This is a plastic screw clamp, a worm drive clamp, just like a regular hose clamp, but it's plastic instead. And I've put a little bit of 3/8 inch fuel hose around it for a buffer to make it so it doesn't cut into anything here. It doesn't cut into the belt. And the same thing around the lifting eye here, lifting ring on the top of the engine. I just run it around through the lifting eye on the top of the engine, put a little bit of belting or a hose around there, so it doesn't cut through that thing, and that should be good. Anyway, there's a spare belt on there in case the old one breaks. Got a new belt on there on the alternator, but sometimes stuff happens, so it's better to be prepared.